We're just a few months into 2022, and we already have several Mod of the Year contenders for Fallout 4. In this video, I'm going to be highlighting several fairly comprehensive overhauls to the game, including overhauls to the NPCs, their behavior, their AI, a creature overhaul that will bring a lot of interesting and new encounters in the world, and even a combat overhaul that could be a one-stop shop to completely change the way you play this game. These are the perfect mods to install right at the start of a new playthrough, and really, with just a couple of mods, transform your experience. And we got some surprises in the mix also. Well, before we get into that, we have to shout out the demonetization saviors on this channel. The first game to bring a true console level experience to your phone, and today's video sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. And hey, if that was enough to convince you, you can download Raid via the QR code on screen or my link in the video description right now. But if you require a bit more, one of the best things Raid has to offer are its champions. The Sky Touch Shaman has an incredibly memorable outfit, but even more seducing abilities where she could heal your whole team each turn and even revive allies on death. But if you want something a bit more traditional and even potentially powerful, we have the Royal Guard. He looks awesome, but more importantly, he hits incredibly hard. He does damage based on an enemy's max HP, making him absolutely imperative to taking out these very scary bosses. But bosses for me are one of my favorite parts of Raid. You build out a specific team and feel like you're really achieving something as you take down these epic monsters and enemies. And it is a phenomenal time to be playing because right now is Raid's 3-year anniversary and the celebrations are huge, with Raid getting some of its first ever champion skins. But stop waiting, use my QR code on screen now or the link in the description, and new players will get a free starter pack worth almost $40. 3 free champions with Menagerie, Tiger Soul, and Romero, 10 Magic XP Brew, 10 Force XP Brew, and 10 Spirit XP Brew. You'll find your rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days only. But looking back at Fallout 4, we have one that's surely going to end up being a major entry into the Fallout 4 modding scene in the years to come. That with the Fallout 4 AI Overhaul. Coming from the same mod author to create the AI Overhaul for Skyrim, which has now amassed hundreds of thousands of downloads. What this will do is update the monotony of the daily lives of random NPCs in Diamond City and Good Neighbor, and somewhat some of the other miscellaneous NPCs added in the world and by mods. It updates several things about these characters. You'll notice more movement in these popular cities, which is very realistic if you've ever been to a city or town. The NPC schedules here are now going to be revamped to be more dynamic, so you'll pretty consistently see NPCs scurrying around as they go from one task to the next. They will actually have much more to do during the day, and as such, cities just feel more lively. There are new idols all around cities, NPCs doing things in places they simply wouldn't have done before, which adds in a nice level of novelty and freshness to these two major places. But NPCs also don't want to die. As threats pop up in places like Diamond City, security will handle it, along with some of these citizens that are actually armed, while the harmless miscellaneous citizens will run for the hills. They're going to sprint in the opposite direction. Diamond City is meant to be one of the most built-up places of the Commonwealth. It would make sense for some of these other miscellaneous people to just run away, not feel like it's their job to actually fight things. Conversely, in Good Neighbor, with a larger sense of community, you will see more of a combined effort against some of these threats as they pop up. Weather will actually have an impact now, making it so NPCs will hide from rad storms, actually running for cover so they don't take radiation damage, and even just some different behavior and standing under cover when it's raining out. Overall, this is a really cool mod to just add to Fallout 4 because it makes these cities more interesting. It's going to make your interactions and time spent there feel a bit more unique and notable, and again, it's just going to be a pretty big change up over what was there for the past 6 years in Fallout 4. But with a further edit to NPCs in a completely different realm, we have NPC Accuracy Revised. By default in Fallout 4, enemies have near perfect accuracy. Basically everything will hit you. This mod is simply going to change that and make it so NPC accuracy will vary from one NPC to another. So if you take, for example, bugs, they don't have as good of accuracy. Bloatflies previously had like pinpoint sniper level accuracy where they would hit with almost every shot to a ridiculous degree. That's no longer the case. You can see here that they are missing a ton of shots, which feels pretty realistic. The random bugs in the apocalypse being one of the biggest threats didn't really make a ton of sense. Now they're rather inaccurate and will miss pretty often, which I personally prefer a lot more. Raiders do a bit better, but are still not great. Raiders, at the end of the day, are untrained chem addicts. That's not exactly the typical sharpshooter, so you'll notice Raiders, especially at medium to long ranges, just missing way more often. But one of the cool parts about this mod is as the Raider tier jumps up, so will their accuracy. Raider veterans, I noticed, were definitely more accurate, and some of the Raider bosses are going to actually have pretty good accuracy because naturally they're going to be some of the best equipped and have the best skills. As you would guess, gunners have some really good accuracy. These are actually trained paramilitary. But one of the points of this mod is it's not going to be quite as good as vanilla. Gunners in vanilla Fallout 4 are still more accurate than gunners with this mod, even though the gunners with this mod are still relatively accurate. But going from gunners to raiders, you'll notice the gunners landing more shots. And lastly, when it comes to synths, things are largely the same. Synths are basically as accurate as vanilla because they are literally robots. It would make sense that the robots are actually really good shots. So although in some sense this mod can serve to make the game easier, although we'll talk about that in a moment, it also does have this really nice effect at mixing up and changing up your different enemy encounters. It feels like there is genuine variation. Fighting a bunch of raiders is now an easier challenge compared to a bunch of gunners because the raiders will literally hit you less, which does feel very accurate, as well as making some of those harder enemies like synths or some raider bosses feeling like more genuine challenges, as well as it makes some of those high tier factions like the Brotherhood of Steel just feel like a truly powerful threat. You will really start to feel how much more accurate these guys are. But since enemies are going to be missing a bit more, a great tandem mod and a great mod to overhaul the combat in Fallout 4 in general is Maim. So at its core, what Maim is going to do is add in 3 major new components to combat and healing. Bleeding, so when a body part takes enough damage, it will start to bleed and will slowly drain your health unless that bleeding is addressed. This will apply not only to you, but also to enemies, so you could take a few good chest shots on an enemy and hide as you'll see them slowly bleed out. There is pain. When a body part takes enough damage, it will be in pain and lead to debuffs to your character, such as a slower reload speed, the inability to sprint, or even blurred vision. This builds off this limb framework added in with this, where limbs are really accounted for here. It's much easier to target legs and lead to enemies limping, but also things like how headshots are now nearly always lethal if somebody is not wearing a helmet, and if you have a big enough gun, even if they are wearing a helmet. And although this mod has a ton of technical components, such as the vast array of new aid items that are implemented to address the various ailments that can pop up now, I really want to focus on it in a bit more holistic sense. The changes this will bring to combat and conflict in Fallout 4 overall. What this mod will really do is up the ante of combat. You're not going to be able to play as fast and loose as you could previously in Fallout 4, and if you get shot too many times, you will have several limbs critically injured and simply won't be able to stop the bleeding and stabilize yourself in time. So as a result now, you're going to have to really focus on cover, focus on when you move out or when you expose yourself, because if you get way too many unanswered shots, you're kind of just done for. Armor, of course, will help you still, but you can only apply the solutions to those ailments so quickly. And there are a variety of solutions for both bleeding and pain. You take painkillers to quickly get through a combat encounter, and then you can apply a longer term solution to the plain or broken limbs later, or even just gauze or tourniquets for limbs. But one of the biggest changes you'll notice with this mod is HP is now a very valuable commodity, and I really love this. Stim packs no longer instantly refill your health bar, but rather it's going to be more of a trickle. You will slowly regain your HP. It is relatively easy to stop a bleed with a tourniquet, but regaining that HP that you lost from getting shot or from the bleeding will take a fairly long time and really can't be done quickly in combat. So you're kind of forced as a result of this to take combat slower and even sometimes run away. If your HP falls too low, you're not going to have a quick and easy solution to just regain all of it, especially if you are actively in combat. So it may simply not be worth staying in that combat encounter and rather just run away, heal up, and then come back a bit later. This mod kind of divides up its solutions to injuries in 2 major categories. It does have the short and quick ones that you could apply during combat, and then more longer term solutions you could apply after that are a permanent fix to that, but may take time to fully apply. For me, it was just a very fun change up, forcing you to think way more because if you make a big mistake, it will cost you. It definitely makes the game harder, but in a more fun way. I think the changes with HP are a nice nice change up over what the Fallout 4 combat system has by default. And this does feel like it's different than the other combat or damage mods. The value of your overall health points with this mod just skyrockets, and there's not many other mods that deal with something exactly like that. You can still mess around with the difficulty, making it so the game is easier if you want enemies to deal less damage to you overall, but in general it's a pretty fun one. And also, for those of you wondering, this condition UI element is fully customizable. You can make it smaller or non-existent if you don't want to see it. I just left it in its default position for while filming this video. And this mod is fully animated, which is really nice. So whenever you're healing yourself, you will have an animation play, which does up that immersion factor. Then we do have Mutant Menagerie, Horrors of the Deep Fog. This mod is awesome. It is a sequel to one of the best mods of 2021 with Mutant Menagerie. But what Horrors of the Deep Fog is going to do is add in a wealth of new creatures into Far Harbor, and even somewhat into the Commonwealth. This is going to add in a whole range of new creatures ranging from cute and timid, but also terrifying things that will pop up out of the Far Harbor fog. All of these are incredibly appropriate for the environment and have that heavy sea creature influence, perhaps even some based off of sea creature myths. Some of these have very obvious real-world influences, like the sea turtles that you could find both on land and water and are actually fairly common. These guys can definitely be cute and cuddly and actually make a pretty good meal if you want to go that route. Sea lurks are described as smaller, more timid creatures, but still in the mirelurk family. They'll be more patient, but still will attack you and are very common in Far Harbor now. Deep in the sea, you'll find all kinds of horrors, ranging from the squid-based barbers who will literally poke you to death, or the much stronger krakens that will erupt from the sea to attack you. These guys can definitely be terrifying, whether you encounter them in the water or outside of the water. They can be a serious threat and definitely one of the more boss tier enemies. But what is easily a boss tier enemy and one of the most terrifying and best designed creatures are the rad hammers. These are sharks adapted to land that can hit very hard. Obviously having that similar design to death claws, but just being really, really cool. I love these guys and I feel like they're such a good addition to Far Harbor, and even somewhat to the Commonwealth as they can appear on the borders there. This is not a comprehensive look. There are way more creatures added in with this, but I'm not going to go through each and every one and describe what exactly they do or the story behind them. I think half the fun with this mod is installing it and getting to experience and find all of these creatures for yourself. It's going to have a bunch of both sea and land enemies added in that will be passive and aggressive. And all of these are enemies intended for combat. Some just fill out those leveled lists of miscellaneous creatures you'll find wandering throughout. And this will also add in some of the creatures from the traditional Mutant Menagerie into Far Harbor, so you'll have the level list be a bit more diverse, as well as special fog-touched creatures. Creatures infected by the Far Harbor fog that are some of the toughest in the area and will be some of the biggest fights in the game. These do have special drops that you can use for crafting later on, and also this blue tint to them. There's only a select few on the island overall, and they're relatively rare, but again, a pretty big fight. A really cool part about this mod is it's actually going to add in several boss fights into Fallout 4, this being both in Far Harbor and some in the Commonwealth. These are very unique and stand out. I don't want to spoil too many of them, I'll just show you one of them, but just a more unique encounter that you'll find somewhere, again, both in the Commonwealth and in Far Harbor. This mod overall really helps to flesh out Far Harbor and take what is already one of the best experiences in Fallout 4 and elevate it to a new level. There aren't many creature mods for Fallout 4, and there are basically no creature mods that are exclusive to Far Harbor and add in this much content. And I also like the implementation of some of these creatures starting to pop up on the edges or outskirts of the Commonwealth, but not quite infesting the Commonwealth because that wouldn't make a ton of sense. And it also does continue the trend from the traditional Mutant Menagerie of adding in new and unique craftable items based on the drops from these creatures. So you may find some of the new chem items or cookable items from these creatures or what they drop are actually pretty powerful, and you may want to start using them. But with a ton of new threats and even a combat overhaul, you're going to need a new weapon to use, and that's why we have the Escape from Boston HK-G36. This weapon is simply great. It adds in a fully modular HK-G36 into Fallout 4 and is one of those weapon mods that is truly a platform, which is really the reason I like this. It has a whole wealth of customization options, including 5 receiver types, which will really change or overhaul the look and feel of the weapon overall. On top of those receivers, you can edit basically everything. There's over 20 scopes to choose from, tons of stocks, and even barrel extensions. Pretty much all of the staples of a great modern weapon mod for Fallout 4. But it also has this fun mechanic with different calibers having different pros and cons. It isn't just a simple pick of the best receiver for most damage, but some other ones that deal less damage have other benefits benefits to them. And with this mod, you could really have an AR, a compact weapon, or a full-on machine gun or DMR. I've become much pickier with my weapon mod choices as of late, and this one finds a pretty good spot in one of the options in my load order. I'm pretty much just sick and tired of downloading 30 different weapon mods on another Fallout 4 playthrough, so I've been tending more towards these weapons that are kind of several weapons in one, even though it's just one download. It adds in the G36 as a true platform, and that's why I like this mod. But with that said, hopefully you liked this video, both internally and hey, even externally if you want to hit the like button. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. There's actually some more Fallout 4 content on the horizon. I'm already working on another Fallout 4 modding video. There's been a lot going on in the Fallout 4 modding scene. With that said, as always, again, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.